Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I'm so sorry to be recording later than desired. This is going to be a recording for Sunday's daf, Sunday, January the 23rd, and that will be daf Yud Aleph. And then tonight, Emir Tashem, in person, we'll be learning daf Yud Beis, which is today's daf, Monday's daf. Let's get started. We're 5-6 lines before the bottom of the page of Yud Beis. I'll try to move quickly in case anybody is in a rush to finish the blot. Let's get started. The Gemara says, actually 6 lines from the bottom, Ravina have a masik zuze bivnei akra deshan vasa. He had outstanding money with people and wanted to make some collections and payments, and everyone is home during this time of the year, but it's Chol Moed. So how do we treat financial transactions in regards to Chol Moed? The Gemara says he went to go ask a shayla, so the Kame de Ravashi, and Ravashi was asked the following question: Amar lei, what about today, Rabbi? Can I go ask people to pay me? Can I go pay people? Am I allowed to do this on Chol Moed? So Amar lei, since now people are actually around, but during the regular parts of the year, nobody's around. It's as if you're going to lose business, and therefore it's permissible to do so. We have this very similar halacha in regards to some of our interactions with those who are idol worshippers, those who are of the avodah zarah. We read shel akum on a particular day when they would have a yom deshuka, as Rashi says. They'd have a day where they had a marketplace day. Belokhin, on those days, you could buy behema, you could buy animals, avadim, slaves, shvachos, maidservants, batim, houses, sados, fields, uchram, and vineyards. And you're allowed to write a shtar, and you're allowed to submit it into the secular courts. Why? It's as if under those circumstances that one is going to lose their property. That will be considered a davar ha'aved, and therefore it's kematzil miyadan. One is therefore allowed to write those contracts and submit them into the secular courts. Rav shara l'chia bar ashi l'migdal ohari b'chula demoda. Rav allowed for Chia bar Ashi to build fish traps on Chol HaMoed. The reason why that was allowed, my time of Maseches Yodhu, that was considered to be an amateur style avoda, malacha, and therefore it wasn't problematic. Aval isle, but bird traps, that's a little bit more sophisticated. The logistics of this are not clear in the Gemara. That's usher. The bird traps are not allowed, my time of, because that's Maisa Uman. So a very clear distinction in the Gemara between that which is a Maisa Uman and that which is a Maisa Hedyot. Rabbi Yehuda, Shara, he allowed Le'ami Tanura, Ami, the oven maker, Lemigdale Tanure. This guy had a business on the corner. He used to build ovens. So the halacha is that he was allowed to build them. Well, the Rabbi Bar Isvi, he also allowed Rabbi Bar Isvi the Migdal Maholta. He was allowed to make sieves that were used to filter things, whatever it may be, colanders. Says the Gemara, Eini, is that first halacha true? The Rabbi Yehuda would allow Ami Tanura to build ovens. That's not true. We learned that one is not allowed to build an oven. Answers the Gemara. It depends what time of year it is. During the summer, the ovens cure faster when they're made out of clay, and therefore they will more likely to be used on Chol Moed. You make it on the first day of Chol Moed, it'll be ready to be used on Chol Moed. But during the winter months, when it's much colder, it's less likely to be prepared on time, and that's the distinction. That's when we say it's not lechatchila. The new Mishnah writes that osin makia legagul mirpesas, one is allowed to make a fence around their roof and around their porch. However, maisa head yoravalo maisa uman. It can only be an amateur's work. Someone who has a good hand, they can build something on their own. But maisa uman, you're not allowed to be a professional, and to do that, that's unacceptable. Shavines hastakinu magilin or some magil will be out of a regal. Here we're talking about filling in some of the cracks in an oven. Let's say it's made out of pottery, something along those lines. You're allowed to fill in the cracks. That's considered acceptable. And umagilin or some magila shal yad. Seemingly, a magila is a type of tool. It almost seems kind of like the blade that's used to put putty in a wall. Let's say you're doing drywalling, you need to put in a little bit of putty. That's what it seems like. And you're allowed to do so b'ma'agila b'yad u'b'rega with your hands. Now, but you can't use a professional type of rolling pin, some type of tool that they were using, which was considered the ideal way to do it. So we see from here that there's some level of shinui that's required when we're doing fixing projects in regards to the ovens of the time. as well. Hatzir v'hatzinor v'hakore v'hamino v'hamafteach. These are all parts of the door: the hinge, the receiving part of the hinge, the beam across the top, and the locks and the keys. All of those, shenishbruch, they broke with Kattan b'moed. You're allowed to fix those. However, you can't save the work to be done at that time. That's inappropriate. You know what? I have a little bit of free time during Chol Hamoed. I'm not going to change my locks now. I'll change it when the time comes, but there's no need for me to do it now. I'll have time on Chol Hamoed. That's us. So you're not allowed to do that. So then the Gemara continues with a third din. B'chol kavash, in any food that you plan to soak in the liquid in order to give it its flavor, picklings, things along those lines. If they have a pretty rapid absorption that from the beginning of Chol Hamoed, that it will be consumed on Chol Hamoed or on Yom Tov L'chora. So then the halacha is koshen, that then you are allowed to do that process on Chol Hamoed, implying that if your pickling takes a week or 10 days or more than the period of time that the holiday lasts, then it would not be allowed. Says the Gemara, how do we determine what a Maaseh Hedyot is in regards to the building of a ma'akeh, building of a fence around a roof, or building a fence around the mirpesas? Answers the Gemara of Yosef Amar Behutza V'Dafna. We're talking about ferns and branches and small pieces of wood. B'mas nisatan, however, there's a brisa that says tsar b'tzar v'eino tach petit. One is allowed to stack bricks, maybe even in the way that we have them on our house, which is one row and then the row above is slightly staggered, like the Oz Yashir. That's 1, 2, and then 1, 1, 2, and then 1. However you stack it, but without using any mortar, that would not be allowed. That's the distinction between a hedyot and an uman. Next, shafin es astakin umagin and son b'magila. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah doesn't make sense. You said that you're allowed to create, fill in the holes of the cracks with some type of putty, no problem. But says the Gemara, hashta b'magila amrit shari. Once you said that you're allowed to use one particular tool, isn't it obvious the case that it would be the case be out of a regal nibaya? You're giving me such a strange distinction to say that a tool is allowed, and so are feet and hands. Feet and hands fix a problem that requires tools. It's the biggest shino you could possibly have. So why the distinction? Says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. We misunderstood the Mishnah. Hachi kamar, here is pshat in the Mishnah. The Mishnah writes, what it should have written was shafin es hastakin. Yes, one can fill in the cracks of an oven. Ma'agilin osan ke'ein ma'agila biyad regel. We can use our hands as though they are that tool, but not that the tool itself is allowed. Aval lo b'machal tzayim, but we can't mimic the actions of a machal tzayim or use the tools of a machal tzayim, only that of a ma'agila, which is the less severe type of tool. What about the door parts halfway down in Yud Aleph and Aleph? So the Gemara says that all the door parts that are broken can be fixed on Chol Hamoed, no problem. Or minhi, that's not so simple. We said that up ad yom patish makib Yerushalayim, up until his days. Who's him? The Gemara doesn't even say who it is. So Rashi explains it's talking about Rav Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Ad yom of in mikan ve'elach lo. So during the times up until the time of that he was in charge, people, it was patish makib Yerushalayim. You'd hear people hitting their hammers on things during Chol Hamoed. However, only ad yom that's not allowed. So that's a stira. How can our Mishnah say that you can fix all of these things? Yet up until the times of Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol, after that time, we weren't allowed to do those types of activities during Chol Hamoed. The Gemara gives a few answers. Some say that Rabbi Yochanan's restriction on all of these sounds, on all of the hittings of the hammers, had to do with how loud it was. It says the Gemara, there's a difference between how loud it is when you're hitting metal, but the nafchi, that's a blacksmith. When you hit metal with metal, it's extremely loud. The clanking sound is significant. And kan b'denagri, we're talking about carpenters, and hitting wood is not quite as loud. Says the Gemara, come on. I mean, the distinction in the sound between one and they're both loud. Okay, one's medium and one's loud. Yomru kala rabba asir kala zutar shari. I mean, that can't be what Rav Yochanan Kohen Gadol meant. Therefore, the Gemara pivots and says, One's talking about a saw. The sawing sound is very, very quiet. Your neighbors are not really going to hear it. Talking about an actual saw. We're not talking about anything electrical, obviously. And there's an axe. And when an axe hits wood, again, it's not even a hammer. It's a little more subtle, but still, it's still somewhat audible, a little bit louder. And that's the distinction. Rav Papa Amar, no, what are you talking about? The most obvious Balabatish presentation of this should be Kan Kodem Gzera, Kan La'achar Gzera. Our Mishnah should have been before the Gzera of Yochanan Kohen Gadol. And the brisa that restricts it is Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Of course, that should have been the answer. The Gemara doesn't present that as its first case. Strange. Would have been the most simple of answers, but maybe it was important for the Gemara to get to the underbelly of Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol's thinking that the sounds are the problem. So therefore, the distinction of no sound versus sound was valuable. Rav Ashi Amar HaRabbi Yehuda HaRabbi Yossi. It depends. There's a machlokas Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi, and that's the two different shitas. One allows for the sounds and one does not. The Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi taught us that one is allowed to do a davar aved with a shinui. It's not how we paskin. We paskin a davar aved is straight up mutter, as we'll see momentarily. So who is that opinion? Says the Gemara, Deloka Rav Yossi. That's obviously Rav Yehuda. So therefore, the one who says that there's a shinui on a davar ha'aved, and therefore you're not allowed to do certain things, or you have to do a certain shinui. Like our Mishnah said, you have to use your hand by davar ha'aved. That's going to be not Rabbi Yossi. Namely, it's going to be Rabbi Yehuda. Like whom do we hold? Like when we do hang a door on its hinges. So says the Gemara, it must be Kiman ki Rabbi Yossi. That's how we paskin halacha lemaisa. That when we have a davar ha'aved during Chol HaMoed, it is absolutely mutter for one to do so without a shinui. Now, not everything is a davar ha'aved. This requires a shaila. Art Scroll put out a book by Rabbi David Zucker Shlita. We have it on our shelf here and in the base medrash as well. It's called Chol HaMoed. The halachos of Chol HaMoed are super complicated, and you have to read the whole book cover to cover many times, probably every year. It's very difficult to know exactly what a davar ha'aved is. Technologies change, times changed. It's just really, really difficult. So in Shulchan Aruch too, it's very hard to learn these halachos straight through without having modern day poskim, because even the Mishnah Brura died in 1933. Nothing of the technological resources that we have were available at that time. So everything is different. Even picking up your phone, is that mutter? On Shabbos, it's an Isser Derabanan. How does it play out on Chol HaMoed? Is it only picked up for davar ha'aved? These are shilas that require posting. The Gemara says 2/3 of the way down at the two dots, heading toward the end of the first parak of Maseches Moed Kattan. Let's continue. That you're allowed to pickle foods as long as they'll be edible by the time Chol HaMoed ends. Says the Gemara a story. Bedisa was the name of a river. Bedisa Levoy, the river of the people of Levoy, Kavre. They turned into a little bit of a fish. What does that mean? So the Mefarshim explained that what these three words mean is that they basically drained this particular body of water so that all of the fish were easily catchable. You take a river that's 20 feet tall and you drain it down to 1 foot tall. All the fish are within 1 foot of the ground. They're easy to catch. So it says, Azla Kule Alma. Everybody came to capture fish. It was such an easy time to go fishing. Says the Gemara, Tzod Aisu Kabra. They went and they captured fish. And Sharluhu Rava Lemimlach Minayu. Rava said, don't worry, you can stick these fish in salt and eat them after Chol HaMoed. How can you say you can do that though? We just said that if you're going to pickle something, that it can only be done if it's ready now. But if you take that fish and you stick it in a container of salt so that it doesn't spoil and you can eat it next week, Amar Le Abaye, we have a Mishnah question mehen bim moed koshan, only if it's edible now. So on Chol HaMoed, when the people of Levoy drained the Medisa River and all of the fish were close to the bottom, yeah, you can take them to eat them, but you can't salt them for later. That's usher. That's what the Mishnah says. Amar Le says, Rabba back to Abaye. We didn't collect them to go shopping for 2 weeks. We collected them to eat them right now. Okay, you have some extras, fine. So then you can put those on salt. Not a problem at all. If we leave them over, they're going to spoil without salting them. Therefore, that would then be permissible. Because the Amri, some people present this question of the Gemara, Abaye Rava, with our Mishnah in a different way. Shariluhu Rava Meitzad Meizal, that a person's allowed to go, I see Memlach, and then they ended up salting them. Amrle Abaye, the Anon Kvashin Shu Yachal Lechol Mehen Koshin. Our Mishnah says you're only allowed to pickle things if they're going to be edible during the Moed. Amrle Hani Nani Misachle Agav Itzitza. Even the ones that we salt are still going to be edible as long as we rinse off the salt. No big deal. And in fact, the Gemara tells a few stories like this. They had a whole host of a collection of these very, very heavily salted fish, and then they rinse them off. You rinse it off enough, it's edible. Before you rinse it off, it's inedible. So that's how they kept it in refrigeration. All of their meats were kept that way. They were heavily salted so that they wouldn't spoil. And then afterwards, they'd rinse them off very, very well. Fine. Same thing, but when Rabba went to the Reish Galusa, so then they would also rinse off all of the fish all as well. Rav Ikla Lebei Bar Shapir, Aisula Kamaihu Hahu Kaver, brought some fish in front of him. Tilsa, a third of them Bishula were cooked in liquid. Tilsa Milcha, a third of them were salted. The Tilsa Tabia, and a third of them were fried or roasted of some kind. Amar Rav a few comments that Rav says in the name of Rav Ada Bar Abba. Omar Rav, Omar Li Ada. What did Ada say? The best time to eat fish is right before it spoils. Who knows? Doesn't taste good even when it's fresh. Omar Rav Ada. When a person does cook fish, they should do so be'achva, with its brother. So the Gemara is giving a mashal. The fish is the brother of the fish is salt. Both salt and fish are found in water. And asuke be'avuha, and it should be cooked be'avuha with its parent. The parent is the water, the children are the fish and the salt. Michle bibre, and you should eat it with its child. What's the child of the fish? It's brine. And ishte ale avuha, and you should also be drinking its father, which means you should be drinking water. Bit of a sophisticated mashal for the best way to eat fish. And another comment, V'amar Rab, Amar li Ada, Saida Kavra, if a person is going to be trapping fish, tachle, b'chalva, cress, and milk products, liton gufa below liton purya. One should carry it in its body and not carry it on its bed. This is the Gemara speaking homiletically that one should not go to bed on a full stomach. They should try to go to the bathroom before they go to sleep. So Amar Rav, Amar Li Ada, last comment of Rav in the name of Rav Ada, and last one of the parak, the karba tachle v'chalba. If a person is going to eat one of these foods, then what should they do? They should drink maya v'lo shichar. They should drink water and not beer. However, if they don't want to drink water, then shichar v'lo chamra. They should drink beer, and they should not drink wine. Hadran aloch. Mashkin Beis Hashlachan Baruch Hashem Mazel Tov for finishing the first parak of Moed Kattan. We should come back to this day in 7.5 years. Let's continue. Top of Yud Aleph on the base. The Mishnah writes, a person is in the process of pressing olives in order to extract olive oil, and then Rahman al-Litzlan, they become an avel. So it says the Gemara. But the Gemara is going to ask about this. What in the world does this have to do with Chol HaMoed? Just a Nebuch scenario. Just unfortunate. But what do we do now during Avelos? Can you not do it? Fine, that's its own question. Nesar, something else happened out of your control. You couldn't finish the process. Shehit uhu poalim, your workers tricked you. They didn't show up for work. So then, in all of these cases, during Avelos and during Chol HaMoed, as it relates to Ones or your workers not showing up, then even though it's Chol HaMoed, Toin Kora Rishona, you can do the first part of the pressing down of the olives. The rest you have to leave till after Chol HaMoed. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, he kind of gives a blended answer of kind of yes. You can do the first part, but you can't complete the process. Rabbi Yosef Amar Zolet v'Gomer v'Gaf Kedarko. You can finish the entire process all the way to the point of putting it in a barrel. The Gemara says, what is going on here? Pasach ve'avel v'siyim v'moed. Why would we compare the world of Avelus to the world of Moed? Says the Gemara, just a bomb of an answer. Amar Rav Shisha Beredi Rav Idi Zos Omeres Devarim Hamutarim b'Moed Asurim b'Mei Evlo. That which is permissible during Chol HaMoed is aser during Avelus. Rav Ashi gives a different answer. Rav Ashi Amar Lomi Boya Kamar. It's giving an answer of not only this but even that. What's that answer? Lomi Boya b'Mei Evlo D'Midrabanan Hu B'Shari. I don't need you to tell me that during that this is permissible during Avelus, but what I need to make sure that we have clear is as follows: that that when it comes to the Isser of Malacha and Chol HaMoed, which is an Isser D'Oraisa, we wouldn't like to be Mechalel Shabbos. We should definitely not like being Mechalel Chol HaMoed. We need to learn these halachos klor. It says the Gemara, we need to make sure that even over there by Avelus where it's mutter, okay, no big deal. That's the Rabbanan. That the rabbis allowed for the Makom Hefsid, when there's a Hefsid, Meruba, Dabara Aved, all the kulas that we've been speaking about so far. So we need to make sure that we know that it's even allowed by Chol HaMoed. Tanya Kavasid Rav Shisha Bred Rav Idi. Some say like Rav Idi that there's a connection between the halachos of Avelus and the halachos of Chol HaMoed. There are things that you can do for an Avel in his Avelus. You're allowed to flip over, you're allowed to press down on the olives, the kadolagu, if you're allowed to close a barrel, pishtan lahalos mina mishra, you're allowed to take flax out of the liquid in which it's soaking, v'tzimmer lahalos mina yora, you're allowed to take out wool that's soaking in its dye, umar bitzin sadeu mishetagi onas hamayim shel, you're allowed to water his field for him, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, avzor and lo sada near, you're allowed to plant a field, v'sadeh hamed is the pishtan, and you're allowed to plant pishtan as well. It says the Gemara, Amrulo, I don't understand. If you don't plant in this earlier part of the year, plant next week. Tizra be'efel, plant a little bit later. Why do you have to plant right now in the middle of his avelus? So says the Gemara, why do you only have to plant flax? He's an avelus. Plant something else. This is not a right time for him to plant. He's running minacher. Go plant something else. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, a little bit more than halfway down, 3-4 lines before the wide lines. Let's say that you need to press the olives, but he's the only one who knows how to do it. Kado laguf, you need to close a barrel. He has a unique set of skills. You need to take the flax out. You need to take the wool out of it. It's liquid. He's the only one who knows what's going on. So he's allowed to do it even as an avel. So this is a din that is halacha l'maisa by an avel, that when there is tzorchei tzibur and you're the uman, so then it's mutter to do that. Even teaching Torah, even though learning Torah during avelus is limited. My Rebbe told me that the hardest thing for him to do during his avelus for his parents was not to learn for 7 days. He'd never gone a 7-day stretch certainly as an adult without learning many hours of Torah a day. He felt totally bereft of whatever was normal in his life. So it's you're allowed to do that as a rav, as someone who's whatever the case is, they're Talmud Chacham, they're allowed to teach. Hareza Yasa B'tzina. Yeser al Kain, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said more. Yeser al Kain Amar Rashbag, Im Haya Uman Lerabim, the Sapar, Ubalam the Rabbim, you're the person who gives haircuts, you're the person who's the bath attendant, the Esa Regel, and his Avelus coincides with the Esa Regel. Things are so busy. So then, Ve'en Shem Uman Elahu, he's the only one who knows how to run the mikvah, who knows how to run the bathhouse. Hareza Yas, he's allowed to leave his Avelus and go do that. Ha'arisin, V'ha'charichen, V'ha'kablan, these are workers. Some of them have percentage contracts. Some of them have fixed contracts in order to run fields. V'ha'kablan, those are salaried employees. Ha're'elu Yaseh Acherim B'shvilan, you can have others do work for you. Hachamaran, ha'gamalan, v'hasapanim, those who rent out donkeys and camels and boats, hare'elu lo yasu, that's not something that you should do. V'im hayu muchrachim l'skar netzel acherim, then hare'elu yasu. Once it's already in motion, then you can leave the rental as it is. Schir yom, if you're only a person who's hired by the day, afilu b'ir acheres lo yasu, then that's not right. You should not do that even in another city. Other people have asked you to do something, and that person, Rahman al-Aslan's an avelus, afal pisha b'kiboles, that lo yasa, even though he's contracted to do the work, but it's without a time frame. That's what kiboles is. You're salaried to do the work, but there's no time frame. So then lo yasa, says the Gemara, what a strange language. When you say afal pisha b'kiboles, even though there is no time frame, says the Gemara, that's a very strange language. That implies a chiddush. Says the Gemara, the chiddush should not be where there is no time frame. The chiddush should be where there is a time frame. So it says the Gemara, afal pisha b'kiboles, v'lo mitboya she'ena b'kiboles. It should have been the other way around. We should have been focusing on the other one. That should have been the chiddush. Says the Gemara, adarabba. What it should have said was kiboles kididei dami. Therefore, the Gemara pivots and says, you're correct. 8 lines from the bottom. Elaim of the Brisa should not have said afal pisha b'kiboles lo yaseh. That when it comes to him doing the work of others, that even though there's no time frame, that's not the right language. It should have said elaim ben kiboles ben she'ena b'kiboles lo yaseh. Next section. Let's say instead of you being the one doing the work for others have your work in their hands. I hired someone to do some work for me. So the Beis lo Yaseh, they shouldn't do it in my house. That's not right. But the Bais Acher Yasu, that's okay. Quick story. Says the Gemara, Meryon Berei de Rabin, a person's name. Umar Berei de Ravacha Berei de Rava. Hava lehu hahu gamla de Torah behade hadade. A gamla is normally a camel, but here Rashi says for 4 lines from the bottom, gamla is tzemed bakar bein shneim. It's some type of connection between a few animals, a couple of animals all tethered together. Says the Gemara, that's what they had gamla de Torah. They had a couple of Torah, that's a shor, those are cows or bulls, and they were all strung together behade hadade, 2 of them. And Nebuch Isra be Milsa b'mar berei de Ravacha berei de Rava. The second person in the story, Mar berei de Ravacha, he became an avel. That's when it says Isra be Milsa, something happened to him. Just again, a euphemism for someone in his family passing away. Upaske legamle. However, when he did so, he removed his animal from the other animals. And now in the plow, there weren't 2 animals, there's only one, which I guess under the circumstances wasn't strong enough to pull the plow. It says the Gemara, Amar Vashi Gaber Rabba Kamar Berei de Rabacha Avid Hachi. He should know the din. There's no reason why he should take his animal out. We learned above that it's permissible to do that. So it says the Gemara, I could understand that he doesn't have to be concerned for himself, but how can he pull the animal out of the plow when another person's going to be losing money? It's one thing to be makbid on yourself, but to be makbid on somebody else is unacceptable. It says the Gemara, after all, we learn the animal's part of another plow. Let it go. Why would you pull your animal out? Who savar, and with this we'll close. He was of the opinion that Adam chashuv shiny. When you're the dayan of the city, you're held to another standard. Just a quick mice, and then we'll stop. Rabbi first gave me a kula, but there was a kula that he would never abide by when it came to bris milah. There was a family who said to me, we don't want to have metzitza of any kind, even with the kli, even though it's sterile, no metzitza, klal ukla. To be okir, a minagav sing. So no way am I answering that question. I called Rabbi first. I described the scenario to him. The family knows enough, but they really do. They're on the board of local Orthodox institutions, but they're just not so firm. They don't like the optics. I understand. So Rabbi first said, okay, you can do this, but I would. And then another time I asked him, what would you do? He said, I would never do it. So when you're the dayan of the city, you have to be holding yourself to a higher standard. When you're a regular Joe, then you can use the kulas that are built into halacha. But he wasn't willing. The same thing is true over here. Adam Chashuv Shiny had to hold things to a higher standard. We'll stop right here and pick up with Daf Yud Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful day.